Hi everyone, my name is Matthew Patunka and I'm a Cloud Solution Architect for Microsoft.
Hey everybody, my name is John Lunn, aka Johnny Chips, and I'm a technical architect and I work for BT Enterprise in the UK.
My name is Ahmed Lajam and I'm a Cloud Solution Architect at Microsoft.
Hi, I'm Anna McNally. I'm a Cloud Solution Architect at Microsoft.
Hi, my name is George Washira. I work for the Intellectual Property Office as a Senior Engineer for the End User Services.
I'm Richard Griffiths and I'm the Cloud Solutions Architect at Confused.com.
Hi, I'm Abul Kaya. I work as a Technical Payment Specialist for Clive.
So hello everybody, and thanks for joining, and hope you like the intro music there at the beginning of the session. Yeah, bit laid back, eh? Okay, let's get on with it. So yeah, that was just a quick introduction from us here at the Welsh Azure user group. Thanks for everybody that's joined so far. Hopefully we'll get a few more joining throughout the sessions. But like I say every month, this user group is a community user group. It's there, it's set up for everybody that's joined us tonight. So if you've got any feedback, ideas or things you want to speak, reach out to any of us. All our details are on the screen. So behind the scenes, that's the motley crew, as they say, that is kind of sorting these events out and reaching out to all the great speakers that we have at the event. So yeah, say hello to us. Okay, so on with tonight then. So we've got three fantastic guests who are all in the chat at the moment. So thanks so much for the guys that are joining us to do the lightning talks. We've got Baz Van Kam from Nerdio, who's going to come on to talk to us around Ephemeral OS disks and the use with, sorry Baz, I haven't updated that to AVD. That's a terrible faux pas there, but WVD as the slide says, but there we go. Then we got Jake Walsh, who's going to come on and he's going to talk to us around why do we need Azure landing zone. So that's going to be a pretty cool talk there. And then we've got Mark, who's joining us to talk around the SQL IaaS extensions. So around really just trying to get your SQL servers really closer with your Azure environment, keeping them managed. So they're three lightning talks. Then we've got Clive Watson from Microsoft, one of the Cloud Solutions Architect, is going to join us for what we call a feature-length talk on Azure Sentinel. So going to give us a bit of an overview of Azure Sentinel. So yeah, after that, as always, every month we have a bit of a quiz. So if you've not used Kahoot before and you've got a mobile phone, download it. You can also go to Kahoot.com. And you can use the quiz service on there as well if you need to. But yeah, get ahead of that. If you haven't got it on your phone, get prepared for that. So yeah, couple of good prizes we've got again tonight. Probably looking at another couple of Amazon vouchers, £25 vouchers. So always good to join in. And it's a bit of fun. And I know Matt's written this again this month, so it's going to be an interesting one. Okay, as always, be courteous, please, to each other. There's, we're all grown-ups, we're all adults. We've got control of our own microphones and all that good stuff. So yeah, if you can stay on mute when you're not asked to come off mute, that would be great. No silly questions. The chat is open. If you've got any questions as the speakers are talking, drop the questions in the chat. Either the speakers will pick them up themselves or we'll let the speakers know those questions at the end of their sessions. Like I say, please stay on mute unless you're invited otherwise. And then please leave us some feedback. At the end of the session, I'll leave a little link up there with a QR code. If you can scan it and leave us some feedback, it would be greatly appreciated. And then, yeah, there's the link for the Kahoot quiz. So, yeah, get on that. Okay, we're going to do the tweet and win again this month. If you're following us on Twitter, great. If you're not, go and follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn. There's the links there. If you can take a picture throughout tonight's session, show us your favorite piece of tech, tweet it, copy in the hashtag WAUG and tweet at us Welsh Azure, and just give us your most comedy photo. You'll be in with a chance to win, some stickers and some Welsh Azure User Group merch, so t-shirt. What more do you want? So that would be cool. And before we get stuck in tonight, I just wanted a quick announcement about next month's user group whilst everybody's in the meeting. You can RSVP to it now, but we're going to keep to the same format. So we're going to get 3 more lightning talks for next month. Already lined up, we've got Mike, Ashish and Ryan. They're going to come and give us some great lightning talks around various areas of Azure. And we've managed to secure Tim Warner. So the the famous Tim Warner. I joked with him and said I think he's a mini celebrity to me. I think I've watched so much of his content over the years. It's great to have Tim join us, and he's going to talk to us around all the various networking options that we got with Azure. So that's next month's talk. So bookmark that now. On to a note from our sponsors. So I don't know if Andrew, are you taking this one tonight?
Yes, it's going to be myself. Just a brief introduction of the servant, and then my colleague Chris Morman is one of our architects. We'll just talk for a couple of minutes on some of the stuff we do with enterprise scale landing zones.
Cool. Over to you, Andrew.
Yeah, great. Okay. Hope you don't mind. I'm just going to drop a little slide in here as well. And that we are hiring as well. We've got a lot of stuff coming through. We're looking for architects, engineers, and some salespeople. So if anyone's got any interest in switching roles or starting a new career, then get in touch with us over LinkedIn, and we'll open a conversation. So Servant are an all-up Azure consultancy. We only deal with Azure, not multi-cloud. And that allows obviously for deep focus on the work we do. Our bread and butter really is data center exit and all that entails, from straightforward migration to app modernization and transforming some of the richer aspects of people's on-premises stuff into a cloud-first world. We do, as I said, we do most of the stuff is for data center exit, but we are increasingly getting involved with Azure Virtual Desktop, and we've got a couple of large customers there, particularly in the education space, that run into tens of thousands of seats. So we're doing that at scale, and of course not without its challenges. So just like to hand over to my colleague Chris Morland, who's going to say a couple of words on what he's doing for the enterprise scale landing zone stuff. Hi, Chris.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, enterprise scale, and I've actually just seen that Jake's doing a session on that in a while, so I won't tread on his toes and go over what enterprise scale actually is. I'll talk about some of the engagements that we're doing at the minute. I imagine everybody on the call is familiar with enterprise scale, really, because there's a huge push from Microsoft, as the Microsoft guys will know. So everybody wants it at the minute. So we've got, I think I've got 5 going concurrently at the moment. Enterprise scale is a bit like the Azure version of PlayStation 5s at the minute. Everybody wants it, and there's not enough people to do it. Some of the projects that we've got going on at the minute, they start from real greenfield environments. So, you know, basically one subscription where people have just decided to go in and have a play for a little bit. They've liked what they've seen, and they want us to come in and help build that landing zone for them, so that they know that they can have some confidence around what they're going to deploy into Azure is going to be secure, scalable, you know, backed up, all the rest of it. Enterprise scale brings. And then on the other side of the coin, we have some huge enterprise scale environments going out that are real brownfield. The biggest one we've got at the minute is a huge customer in the aviation space. They spend about 4 million a year on Azure across 300 subscriptions. So any of the guys that are on the call can imagine that brings quite a few challenges around enforcing policies and whatnot. A lot of the guys internal to that project have kind of gone, wow, this is going to really change the way that we think about how we design and deploy into Azure. So yeah, so it's all good stuff, all interesting stuff. You can get involved as well, apparently, because we're recruiting too. That's news to me. I've heard they're a good bunch. Get involved.
Well, Chris, we need to have a chat after this call. Yeah.
Somebody else might be doing this spot next month, apparently. So yeah, that's the enterprise scale stuff we're doing at the minute. The huge customer that I mentioned there, it's the whole thing's really interesting because they're actually undergoing a network transformation piece at the minute. So we're replacing their whole network. They're a global company, you know, the multiple continents, and we're replacing all their current networking infrastructure with vWAN. And it's top-end vWAN deployment as well, because they don't really want to use any of the native tools beyond vWAN itself. So they want to use the Azure backbone. It's all their own MVAs and so on and so forth, and you know, a lot of restrictions around what can talk to what. So yeah, that's going on at the minute. All very interesting, busy.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Chris. So that sounds like Servant. So back to you now, Johnny.
Cool. No, Cheers, guys, and yeah, like I mentioned earlier, this is the sponsor slot, and these sessions, you know, they could go ahead, but it's just fantastic to have support with the likes of Servant, you know, and I think when we get back to face, it's going to be cool to kind of have the support of Servant. You know, obviously Des and the team there have been fantastic with the user group. They also sponsor a few of the other user groups across the UK, as you can see there on the screen. But yeah, big shout out and thanks for the support there. Obviously, we do have another sponsor for the group, and that's Admiral. Luke isn't with us again this month, but obviously Admiral and the team there, again, the support that they give us as a user group and just to get the message out there. And to be honest, this is what we, you know, everybody in this session now and any sessions that you join, if you can help us spread the word, it's greatly appreciated. So yeah, huge thanks to both our sponsors, and onwards and upwards with tonight's event then. So moving on. We're a little bit ahead of time, which is great. Baz is in the room, so I'm going to take the opportunity because I think the lightning talks go over slightly now and again. So, you know, it's a lot to ask, fits a lot of great information into a 15-minute slot. But I'm going to hand straight over to Mr. Van Kaam. So, Baz, if you're there, over to you, sir.
I am. Thanks for the introduction, guys. And of course, thanks for having me on the show, enabling me to talk a bit about ephemeral OS disks, short-lived disk storage, and the AVD use case nowadays with a touch of nerdio. I have a cool demo near the end. Takes a couple of minutes, you know, to show you a couple of things around ephemeral OS disks and how you can basically turn the cons into pros. Let me share my my screen to start with. That would be handy. A couple of slides I'd like to share with you guys as well, of course. There we go. You should be able to see my screen now.
Yeah, got you there.
All good? Yeah. All right. So ephemeral OS disks. I want to keep the introduction short because you know 15 minutes is not a long time, of course. Welcome everybody. Good evening. Thanks for joining, of course. My name is Bas van Kaam. Again, I don't want to do a big introduction or a long introduction or anything like that. This is my name. I work for Nerdio. I live in the Netherlands. I'm a father of 3 kids, having a lot of fun, you know, outside of my professional work as well. Life is good. And if you would like to know a bit more about me, please do a Google and you'll find dozens and dozens of pages of me, you know, running a, I don't know, a half marathon or cycling up Alpe d'Huez or, you know, writing a blog post for Nerdio or for my own website or anything like that. So if you're interested, please do. But now I'm going to talk about and want to talk about what ephemeral OS disks are and the AVD use case. I made sure to change WVD and AVD, but you know I might have missed one. So if you do spot one, please let me know. So ephemeral OS disks, this is sort of background information, if you will, are based on the technologies of managed disks and premium storage. So it means that the virtual machine at least needs to support both technologies, but it doesn't mean that every VM that supports managed disks and premium storage both will work with ephemeral OS disks. That's not the case, but of course, there are a couple of handy overviews showing you exactly which VM types and VM families are capable of working with ephemeral OS disks. I've included a couple of links near the end on a separate slide near the end of the presentation to well, to hand out basically. But of course, a managed disk is what we use now. Well, it's sort of the standard, I think, with most VMs on the Azure platform. And you don't have to worry about, you know, high availability sets and zone is integrated, are integrated. I mean, various security related features. You don't have to worry about the storage account and all those types of things. And premium storage is, of course, you know, making use of the faster SSDs in the background. And that's, again, what ephemeral OS disks are based on. However, what exactly is an ephemeral OS disk? Well, it starts with the physical machines in an Azure data center, of course, which will host the Azure VMs that we will consume. And of course, there will be storage attached. Like I just mentioned, premium storage, managed disks, SSDs. And as part of that storage, you will have some sort of cache as well, which could be 100 gigabytes, 200 gigabytes, something like that. Well, that part, that cache part of your storage, part of the VM, of course, attached to the VM, that is what actually makes up your ephemeral OS disk. So that means that if that cache is 100 gigabytes in size, your ephemeral OS disk is also 100 gigabytes in size, or 64, or 200, or even a bit bigger. And of course, your other data disks and your temporary disks will be part of, you know, the premium storage, the managed disk part, as you can see on the slide as well. The good thing about ephemeral OS disks are, well, a couple of things actually. Lower latency, they act like local disks. They're almost directly attached to the VM or very close by. Nothing needs to be mounted, those types of things. So, load times, boot times, adding VMs to a domain and those types of things are really, really fast. And I have a couple of examples really, really quickly in between of that as well. They are also free to use, so you do not pay for any of the storage that you consume as part of the cache, which again makes up the Ephemeral OS disk. So that's of course a big, big plus. However, there's a very big con opposite of that as well, which you'll see on the next slide. Again, part of the SSD cache, like I've mentioned a couple of times already. However, it's important to understand that the image you would like to use, the OS disk, for that specific Azure VM, needs to be able to fit within the cache size that makes up your Ephemeral OS disk. So that means if you would like to use, for example, a standard image from the Azure Marketplace, for example, those are 128 gigabytes in size. If you choose a VM type which supports Ephemeral OS disk, but that disk is 100 gigabytes in size, that specific Ephemeral OS disk, then of course the image won't fit that 100 gigabytes, which also means you won't be able to select that specific disk with that specific configuration of that image. But you'll see that come by as part of the demo as well. So a couple of things to keep an eye on. So like I mentioned, they are not available for all VM types. However, it's the overviews are quite clear. And let's put this on the slide as well, because here you can see that pretty much all of the most popular VMs that are used for AVD today and have been throughout the last 1.5 to 2 years are supported in some form or way with Ephemeral OS disks as well. However, this is the biggest con I was just referring to. They cannot be stopped deallocated. So you can reboot a machine, but you will always pay. They will always be on or need to be on to be able to leverage the Ephemeral OS disk storage, meaning they cannot be shut down and set in a stop deallocated state. So you will always pay for compute. Storage will be free, but compute will always run 24/7, basically. So that's a big con, of course. Dependent on cache size, so not every image will be, or you will not be able to put all of your images on the various cache sizes as part of Ephemeral OS disks available. So that's another one, but we have something that we came up with for that as well, which I'll hopefully have time for near the end. And of course, a couple of things feature-wise that are not supported. Again, I've included a link because there are a bit more. So if any of these types of things are important for you for whatever reason, then perhaps Ephemeral OS disks might not be a perfect fit for you or good fit for you. Far from perfect then, of course. So local to the VM, mounting, starting, stopping, all those types of things, like I mentioned, much, much faster. In fact, Misha has wrote a pretty extensive blog post on that, which I'll get to on the next slide as well, just as a quick overview. So make sure to click the link and have a view, because we won't be able to go over all of the results as part of this 15-minute talk, of course. Cost savings, yes, they are free. But again, if you do not have a proper mechanism in place to constantly, completely remove, destroy those machines and rebuild them rather fast, then, well, I wouldn't say they are useless, because far from it, of course, but it makes it harder to use in AVD environments of smaller and medium sizes, basically. So a couple of things Misha had a look at. So again, I'm not going to go over all of this in detail, but as you can see, 29 up to 131 below here as well. Quite significant differences from a performance perspective. Also, when you look at deploying a new VM based on a premium SSD or Ephemeral, it's like 60% faster or something like that, and the same applies to joining a machine to the domain. Also 35-40% faster or something like that. So worth having a look. Regarding the use case, so that might have been obvious from the start, basically, because it's short-lived disk storage. That's basically what Ephemeral means, or short-lived anyway, as part of that. So a non-persistent workload would be perfect for this. Nothing needs to be stored or saved on the machine, and so on and so forth. This could be a hosted shared model, as in pooled, so RDSH type of deployment. But this works for one-to-one situations as well, of course. So depending on types of use cases, AVD host you would like to use. However, it is important to use this in conjunction with a solid user profile management solution like FSLogix obviously is. And I must be honest, I don't see many AVD deployments not using FSLogix. So it's a logical choice. So let's have a look how we can turn a couple of these cons, so the biggest one being not being able to stop those machines, of course, so you will always pay for compute, into pros using some nerdio magic, basically, as I always like to refer to it. So this is not going to be an extensive nerdio demo, not at all. I'm just going to show you how to quickly create a new host pool. Oh, sorry, this one. A new host pool, and then leveraging those ephemeral OS disks in one or two ways. So let's give it a name. Let's call it 123 just to make sure it's not existing already. You can use the description, of course, doesn't really matter for the demo. Desktop experience might be important, of course, to think about. So we will be using multi-user desktop pooled. We could do single user as well, of course, like I just mentioned. And we need to fill in a name prefix. And as you can see, I've tried out this demo once or twice already, of course, just to be sure that it all works. So the name prefix is sort of an important one because it's used, and that's something you will see on the next screen as part of configuring the autoscale part as well. It's used by the autoscale engine to give all of your machines a unique name. It will use your prefix and it will generate an alphanumeric string, fully automated, of course. It will append that with a dash to the name prefix, and that's how all of your machines will be uniquely named. And that all can be reused as well. So if a machine has been added, it gets a name, removed again, added again, and so on and so forth. That happens, of course, multiple times per day, even for some machines. Then each time that underlying computer account will be disabled, enabled, and so on and so forth. And the names can be reused over and over. Again, that's something that we store for you, meaning AD will stay clean, GPOs will still apply, and all those types of things, whitelisting certificates, whatever you can think of. Of course, we need to select the network. This desktop image can be anything you have within your tenant. As you can see, it can be a marketplace image. It can be a custom image. Doesn't really matter. Or a, the shared image gallery is also supported, also with ephemeral OS disks, by the way. Let me just select this one for now. And as you can see, you need to pick a VM size. And this, of course, is an important part when working with ephemeral OS disks, because if I keep it at the default and then look at the disks, we can see that we have a 64 gigabyte disk available, but it's not ephemeral. So it's not making use of the caching mechanism and so on and so forth. And of course, it will be grayed out because, this, let me see, this image does not fit on a 64 gigabyte disk. Makes sense, right? So let me select the next one, which will have an ephemeral OS disk, as you can see, but it's 100 gigabytes in size, which again will not fit with an image size of 128 gigabytes. Also makes perfect sense. So let me take it one step higher, and then you will see again another ephemeral OS disk will be available, and it's 200 gigabytes in size, or can be at max. So 128 gigabytes will definitely fit. This will be quickly assigning users, groups of users, whatever you would like to do. If I showed it as part of a demo, I always do that afterwards because you'll have a better overview with filtering options and those types of things. But you can do it quickly for testing purposes here as well. It's now building up the host pool. Will take like 10, 12, 13 seconds, building up the host pool. And at the same time, it will also open up the autoscale configuration page. And that's, of course, where we can configure how many machines we would like to have part of this host pool and how it needs to act on certain user load and those types of things. And then you will also see, that with building, removing, building, and so on and so forth, you have many options. And of course, that's something that we need to be able to use, leverage ephemeral OS disks without paying, 24/7 basically. Autoscale, need to turn it on, of course. Here we show you estimated monthly costs with regards to the underlying compute and storage. And as you can see, storage is set to 0, and that's exactly what we want and how it should be, because we're leveraging an ephemeral OS disk, as you can see here. Reusing host names, so this is all the information we just filled in and selected, and you can not reuse the host names if you like, of course, if you have a use case for that. And we don't have any time to go over the non-persistent part that we recently added. So with host pool sizing, you can tell the autoscale engine how big you want this specific host pool to be. So multiple machines. But as you can see here as well, it's highlighted now, the black and white text. Because ephemeral OS disks cannot be shut down, the base host pool capacity will always be equal to the minimum host capacity. So here we can say, maybe 2 machines need to be running all the time. And they will be running all the time because they use ephemeral OS disks, so we cannot shut them down, even not with auto scaling. However, we can say if you only have one machine running, for example, and this is a pretty large host pool perhaps, with servicing lots of users, you can say, okay, burst beyond base capacity. So meaning if one machine, which is running constantly, cannot handle the user load, you are capable of building 10 additional hosts on top of basically the base host pool capacity, which is, again, equal to the minimum active host capacity. And then those machines, because these are the types of machines that get built from scratch, completely removed, destroyed, and so on and so forth. So that's perfect for Ephemeral OS disks, because that's exactly what you need. So you won't be paying additionally for the compute resources, which of course is a much higher amount than normally compared to storage, which in this case of course is free. Now we can set this all to 0 as well. It gets even better. We also have start VM on connect built-in, which would also work if we enable that on a host pool level. And we can work with pre-staging hosts as well. So here we can say, for example, and I will get back to the part I just skipped with regards to scaling logic, of course. So here we can say from Monday to Friday, I would like to have one or multiple machines in a booted state at that time, meaning in this example, you will boot one machine, it will be ready to go. And then based on your scaling logic, which I'll get to now, it's capable of building up to 10 machines in total, which would then mean the maximum host pool size of this specific host pool. And again, if those machines are no longer needed, they won't be shut down because that's not possible. They will be completely removed, completely scaled in, as we like to call it. And that's based on scaling logic. You can work with multiple things, as you can see here, CPU usage, average active sessions, available sessions, and so on. And you basically tell the autoscale engine what it needs to do. So based on a certain utilization, as you can see here, one machine is added to the pool, or it completely removes one or multiple machines at the same time. And of course, all of these fields are free to fill in. You can work with any number. Now, one of the things we can do also, and this is often used in production purposes, is that we can limit the time that the autoscale engine is allowed to scale in, or in normal situations without Ephemeral OS disks, shut down machines. So if we configure it like this, it's only allowed to completely remove scale-in machines with Ephemeral OS disks as of 6 p.m. until 8 a.m. In the morning. And when it does, it will do so according to the scale-in aggressiveness rules that you set. So if you set it to high, machines will be put into drain mode. Then after that, it will only look for machines that are empty first, scale those in, and then after that, it will look for machines with the least number of active sessions. And of course, users will first be notified, and only 10 minutes after that, or 15:30, whatever you would like to configure, then the machine is actually scaled in. And if you set it to medium, same thing, drain mode, empty machines first, but after that, it will only look for machines with disconnected sessions, and it will leave all of the other machines alone. And low, of course, drain mode first, but then only empty machines, and it will leave all of the other machines alone. I see that I'm over time already almost, so I will skip the auto heal broken host from where we can auto repair and monitor your WVD agent status. But this is how we take care of, the user experience with having one or multiple machines running all the time, which we could configure here, and cost optimization if we don't want to spend any additional cash on these machines, and make, the fullest use of all of the advantages with regards to performance when building a machine, when working on a machine as well, because the disk will act more like a local disk instead of something that's mounted through APIs or anything or something like that on the Azure platform. And of course, then the cost reduction that you will get because you won't have to pay for storage. Now, I mentioned just one more thing, because if I hop over back to workspaces, back to host pools. So with this part where I started out, with selecting a machine, and then, the second machine did not have a big enough Ephemeral OS disk to hold this specific image, because it's 128 gigabytes in size, and you only have 100 gigabytes of Ephemeral OS disk available. For that, we now have added a scripted action, which will shrink your VMOS down to 64. So you will be able to also use all of the smaller VMs available on the Azure platform, together with or without, if that's something you would not like to use, of course, but with specifically Ephemeral OS disk. So this is a really, really handy feature. And, this is a scripted action, and scripted actions can be applied when, on images, when they are imported, on an imported image, when the machine gets created, when it's removed, when it's stopped, when it's started, and so on and so forth. So extremely, extremely flexible. So that's what I wanted to share with you guys with regards to ephemeral OS disks in general, and how Nerdio makes that easy as pie, as they say. These are the reference links I was referring to throughout the presentation. Hopefully all the links still work. I haven't checked them all, with all the AVD, WVD, WVD, AVD things going around. I'll have a look for questions, of course. I'll mute myself first and answer via chat if I can, if there are any questions. So thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much for the organization as well, you guys, for having me. And unfortunately, I have to go in like 15 minutes, but I wish you all a pleasant evening. Hope you'll learn a lot of stuff, have a lot of fun, and I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Baz. Fantastic. Really cool. Everybody wants to come off mute and give Baz a bit of a clap. Thanks for the session.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Okay. And for our next session of the evening, I think I've seen Jake in the chat there already. Yep, there we go. Mr. Walsh, if you're there, I will hand straight over to you.
Thank you very much. Bear with me 2 seconds. I'm just going to attempt the PowerPoint screen sharing. Cool. Hopefully you can see that okay.
Yep, got you, Jake.
I always make a habit of checking that. I talked for nearly 5 minutes earlier this week to a customer before realizing that Teams had not clicked the share button quite correctly. So always good to be certain. Yeah. So yeah, just thanks for having me. In this lightning talk, I'm going to cover Azure landing zones. I'll just address the elephant in the room first, I suppose, which is I'm spending 15 minutes talking about a subject that we could probably spend 15 days discussing. So, obviously, enterprise landing zones and scale in Azure is a really hot topic at the moment. There's loads of resources out there. This is really just intended as a sort of high-level view, with a few tips along the way, a few things to consider, and a bit of a dive into some of the common design areas that I think will hopefully be helpful. So just a quick intro. My name is Jake Walsh. Currently work as principal consultant for CDW UK. I'm on Twitter. I have a website. Please feel free to follow me and have a look at my site. Kind of focus for me work-wise really is predominantly Azure. Do a lot of work with Azure Virtual Desktop, a lot of work on enterprise scale and landing zones. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. So what are we going to cover in this this presentation? So I'd like to just touch on what landing zones are. We'll cover that in a little bit of detail. We'll talk about why you'd need one as well. What's this man doing talking to us about landing zones? What does he really mean, and what's the sort of the real crux of the matter here? Why are they important? And then I've just got some resources to share that'll hopefully be helpful for that journey. So landing zones are the output of a multi-subscription Azure environment, accounting for scale, security, governance, networking, and identity. I haven't made that up. That's a snippet straight from the Cloud Adoption Framework. If you're really interested in sort of getting into your enterprise scale landing zones, learning more about them, the Cloud Adoption Framework is a fantastic place to start. There's so much resource in there, and it really sort of simplifies that journey for you. It has loads of reference material. It's brilliant. And I'll share a link to that at the end as well. Really, for me, the sort of use of landing zones boils down to 3 things. So it achieves a foundation for scalable and modular growth. And what do I mean by that? Well, I'll give you a slightly more in-depth analogy of it in a minute, but it's really like building a building. You don't just turn up one day with bricks and mortar. There's a lot more to it than that. And that's really what landing zones are doing for you. When we talk about enterprise scale landing zones, we focus on 8 common design areas, and these are the really key areas that need consideration. Again, more on that in a few moments' time. Another really important point, they're usually deployed through automation, but not always. I think that not always is an important point. So every organization is different. If you're like me and you work in a role where you speak to lots of different customers all the time, you'll know there's so much variation. Personally, for me, I like to use Terraform to deploy most of the work I do in Azure as infrastructure as code, but I know there's certainly lots of other options out there. Azure Bicep, ARM templates. There's lots of different ways you can approach that. So this is my horrendously cheesy analogy with a poor selection of clip art. Just I don't think a PowerPoint would be complete without one. But a landing zone is really like building a house. You know, there's things we need before, there's things we need during, and there's things we need after. And that's exactly what landing zones are about. So, you know, if we think of a plot of land, well, that's a bit like our tenancy and our subscription. You know, we can't do anything without that in place. We need some foundations. We need to get those basics in place. You know, perhaps we need to look at what sort of agreement we're going to use. We need some walls. You know, we need things we can put that roof on top of. You know, perhaps that's policy. We need to start looking at services. You know, we need gas, we need water, we need electricity. These are kind of the networking elements. We need to look at insurance. You know, if you're having a nice fancy house built, you probably want it insured in case of, you know, a meteorite or something. And we need to look at alarms and those sorts of extra elements. This is you know, a very simple, albeit, way of looking at a landing zone. You know, there's lots of things we need to consider before, during, and after consuming Microsoft Azure. And that really all comes down to these common design areas. So these design areas: network topology and connectivity, identity, resource organization, governance disciplines, operations baseline, enterprise enrollment, deployment options, and business continuity and disaster recovery. For the vast majority of customers that we work with, certainly in my experience, these are going to be the key areas that they'll need to think about before consuming Azure and before consuming it at scale. I'd just like to run through some of these in a little bit more detail, just to, in some cases, go over things that would need to be considered, but also, as part of this presentation, just provoke a bit of thought. You know, again, just coming back to that point that every organization is different. You know, what works for one customer may not work for the next, but it might work for the one after that. So there's just lots of different things to consider. When we look at network topology and connectivity, we're really considering, you know, what's our topology going to look like? You know, how are we going to connect our resources? How are we going to connect our locations? I think one of the other key things around landing zones here, and particularly relevant to networking, is we need to think about, you know, that might look a certain way today, but how will that look in 6 months? How will that look in a year? How will that change over the next 5 years? You know, are we a company that's you know, embarking on ambitious growth? Are we a company that's about to launch our latest product and we expect hits on our website to, you know, go up by a factor of 10,000? These are all the sorts of things that would need to be considered in that sort of area. Identity as well. You know, this is not just about end user and administrator authentication. You know, we need to think about lots more things. We need to think about roles. We need to think about security. Do we need to look at any customization? You know, do we have any sort of federations or business to business connections that we need to consider? Again, resource organization. You know, 9 times out of 10, when I talk about resource organization to a customer, they'll sort of say, well, it's just resource groups, isn't it? And it's okay, yeah, that is one element of it, but there's lots more around that. You know, how are we going to name our resources? You know, I've had conversations with customers that have lasted well over an hour just around naming, you know, because they've got a complex environment and they need to make sure it's the right fit. You know, likewise, tagging, all of these sorts of things come into resource organizations. You know, different businesses have different structures. You know, some businesses excuse me, are laid out, you know, in a fairly logical structure. Others have a sort of sprawling environment. Perhaps they're very fluid. Perhaps it's a very entrepreneurial company where there's changes all the time. How do we accommodate that? That's just an example, really, of some of the other things that would need to be considered under resource organization. Governance disciplines, again, this is something that varies so much. Every time I speak to a customer, there's always a different level of governance that's needed. You know, you speak to a customer in one country, there's laws in that country they need to adhere to. You speak to a customer in a different country, it's completely different. You know, you speak to certain customers that do certain types of payment or they work in certain industries. There's lots of different things that vary there as well. And it's just really, you know, ensuring all of these things have been considered before we start foot on that journey. You know, the last thing you want is to find yourself 6 months into a journey and then find out that a decision made 6 months ago is, you know, irreversible and causes you a problem. Operations baseline as well. You know, this is really important. I think a lot of you know, a lot of people kind of gloss over this a little bit, but just understanding how we're going to manage, monitor and optimize our environment is really important. You know, speaking to customers in particular, when we look at this sort of design exercise that takes place, that operations baseline is really key, because that will actually define, you know, what we're going to measure the environment against. So it's all well and good, you know, deploying resources, standing up new services, you know, saying, hooray, you know, pats on the back all round, crack open the champagne, everything's moved, we're in the cloud now, it's all working. But if we don't have a benchmark of what we're going to test that against, how we're going to scrutinize that, how we're going to look to improve that, what metrics we're going to gather, it doesn't really, we haven't completed the journey at that point. Enterprise enrollment, again, we need a tenant in place. We need to look at how we're going to consume Azure. What sort of enrollment are we going to use? Are we going to go through, a CSP? Are we going to look at a customer agreement? Are we actually looking at this in a non-enterprise scale way? Are we just looking for a very small deployment for a very specific use case where pay-as-you-go might be appropriate? Admittedly, in enterprise scale, pay-as-you-go is probably not going to be appropriate, but certainly for some businesses, at smaller scale, that might be the right choice for them. Deployment options, again, obviously, as I touched on earlier, for me, I like to use Terraform for a lot of my deployments, but again, different customers may have different requirements, different options. Are we going to look at deploying this, via a DevOps methodology? What tool set might we use to do that? Are we going to use Git repos? There's lots of different things we can consider there. Perhaps the one that I probably spend the most amount of time sort of drawing out requirements with my customers in particular around is the continuity and disaster recovery. I think when you touch on this with customers, a lot of customers think that continuity and disaster recovery is either about making sure there's a backup in place or that we've got somewhere else to spin up the workload. And those are two very simple things to achieve in Azure. We can look at Azure Backup, we can look at site recovery, but where sort of considerations around enterprise scale and these design areas extend that is where we think about, okay, so let's consider we have a regional outage. What do we do? What's the process then? Has that process been considered? Who's responsible for that process? How do we test that process? What's the sort of business objectives in terms of recovery time objective, recovery point objective? There's a lot more to it to think about, and sometimes I guess one piece of advice I would give on that area is that often is a conversation with people from a sort of wider team than perhaps just IT in the business. There might be SLAs, for example, that business has with their customers that need to be considered as well. Just moving on, this is unashamedly stolen from a Microsoft article, and this just an example of a multi-subscription Azure environment, which was the kind of the phrase I said at the start of the presentation. I'm just going to quickly drill down into a couple of things in this. I know there's a lot in this diagram, but this is a really good example of what a large-scale Azure deployment with a landing zone subscription in it may look like. In this case, the landing zone that you can see just in the middle is actually used, I believe, to deploy a particular application. So you can see there's a load balancer, there's 2 servers, there's a database in there. We've got services like Key Vault, some dashboards. What's really interesting about this diagram as well is this is clearly an enterprise scale customer. We can see quite a large management group arrangement, subscriptions. We've got a particular subscription for identity, management, connectivity. We've even got a sandbox in there as well. You'll also notice there's a DevOps team on this diagram as well. So this is a really good example of that sort of enterprise scale growth that a customer might go through in Azure. Again, this is something from the Cloud Adoption Framework. So I'd really recommend, if this is a journey you're likely to go on, just take some time and have a look at this. Again, yeah, this is just a drill down slide. I'm conscious of time, so I won't spend too long talking about this, but this just gives you an overview of the sort of management group structure that's been put in place to facilitate that growth at scale. Again, just another drill down in this slide. You can see here we've got kind of core subscriptions built out to facilitate that growth. I think one of the things that's really interesting here is obviously a subscription. Yes, it's a billing entity. Yes, it's a place you can assign permissions, but it's also in this case being used to segment those resources. And it means if that customer needs to grow at large scale, separate subscriptions is going to reduce some of those resource limits that they would have if they were all in a single subscription as well. So just I think this is a really pertinent point. It's certainly something I've seen with customers, and it's something I stress to all the customers I talk to. Time matters, and time really matters when you talk about a landing zone with a customer. Getting that customer to think, and this is sometimes a challenge because perhaps a customer's just an early, in the early stages of a process of moving to Microsoft Azure, but getting them to think about what their environment might look like today is kind of challenge 1. 6 months is challenge 2. 12 months, 2 years, so on and so forth. And the things they need to consider there really are, how's the business going to grow? What happens if in 6 months' time they acquire another company and they've got to bring that company into their environment? What are the plans for new services, new applications? Have they looked at any future services that they might use? Today they might be thinking, well, we can't move that service because it's unique and there's nothing available in the Azure space to, that can be migrated to, but actually there might be something planned for the future, and that's worth considering as well. That scaling of services as well and traffic growth, that's a really important point. Just because the website processes 10,000 hits a day today, in 6 months the business might take off. Who's to say, for example, that their product won't go viral, or they sell PPE and a global pandemic will hit. All of these things can have an impact, so it's just worth considering those and giving some thought as to how the environment will scale in the future. Just very quickly, I think something else that often gets overlooked is a landing zone. Yes, it's part of the cloud adoption framework, but the well-architected framework comes into this as well. Having a landing zone in place, considering all of these things, makes performing a well-architected review more straightforward. When we look at the things a landing zone helps you get in place, there are also things that draw parallels to a well-architected review. So again, just another thing I think is worth spending some time on, just to make sure you've covered all of those basics. Really just, I guess, a final point for me, just to cover off some of the sort of importance as well. Landing zones are essential to get the right start. For some organizations, that does mean enterprise scale. When we talk about global organizations with large number of users, large numbers of services, it's unlikely they would just be looking at moving one workload and then move another. They're really going to look at, getting an enterprise footprint into Azure and then, bringing their services onto that. For others, though, I think, again, worth mentioning, starting small and expanding as their needs dictate is the right choice. I think, for me, that's a bit like, two sides of a seesaw on a play park, two ends of the scale, and there's a balance to be had. And I think, that's something that when you actually talk to customers, when you discuss, what their requirements are, it's about getting the right balance there for them. Again, a landing zone is important because it provides the foundational resources required. So it establishes those baselines. It makes sure, when you decide, okay, great, fantastic, we're ready to do, project X, it's going to revolutionize our business. We've got the third party lined up to build us this product. We've got all the marketing team. We've got the material ready to go. And then somebody turns around and says, oh, we don't have networking in that data center, or, we're not able to deploy resources in that region, or, oh, we haven't actually got that ready yet. The landing zone gets all of that in place and it removes those blockers for consumption. Again, we need X in place before we can use Y. The number of times I've heard that, the sort of the blockers start to stack up. You find one blocker and then you discover that is also reliant on something else being done. These really help to remove those issues, making sure those supporting elements are in place from the offset. For growth at scale, it ensures those baselines are in place, so ensures those resources are in place without hitting limits. This comes back to what I was saying about separate subscriptions, for example. Obviously subscriptions do have a numerical limit on resources for some customers. Spreading those workloads out across subscriptions is one way to get around that, and looking at an enterprise scale landing zone obviously helps them achieve that. Apologies, I've gone over ever so slightly. That's everything from me. I've got some resources. I'll paste these into the chat, and I hope that was a useful, albeit slightly quick, 15 days worth of workshop condensed into 15 minutes.
There's nothing like a bit of pressure, there, Jake, to cram all that into 15 minutes. No, that was great, fantastic. Yeah, huge thanks, Jake, for joining us tonight. It's really appreciated. Yeah, can we give Jake a round of applause, please? Obviously, you have to come off mute so everybody can hear it, but just clap with mute on. That's fine. Okay, thanks a lot, Jake.
On, so I was thinking if I took mute off, it wouldn't help. You still wouldn't hear it. So.
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, and we'll move on. We'll move on to our next lightning talk session. I'm going to hand over to Mark Jones. Mark, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me okay? Just to check.
Yeah, loud and clear, Mark.
Great, and good evening, everyone. How long have I got? By just a time check.
You've got 15 minutes. Yeah, you've got as long as you need to take. That's if Clive didn't mind, of course. You know, Clive's there in the chat.
Okay, I'll try and stay very to time as part of this. But thanks for your time, everyone, this evening. So my name's Mark. I'm one of the Microsoft Cloud Solution Architects. So I work quite closely with some of the Microsoft team that you probably see in this forum, such as Anna, etc. But I was also lucky enough to spend some time with our engineering team. So I spent 9 months working with the people who write the ones and zeros for some of our Azure products, and was working with those teams as well. But back in the UK and now back working as CSA, as we call it, because we do like our acronyms in Microsoft a little bit. And after those great sessions, want to try and drill down a little bit from obviously enterprise landing zones, enterprise landing scale, and start talking a little bit just about SQL Server as a bit of a focus point. There's a few features that we're kind of introducing when we're looking at SQL Server on a VM that makes the life a little bit easier. First of all, to bring the goodness of Azure a bit closer to that VM, but also how to get some control and some governance on top of SQL Server workloads specifically as you move them over into Azure. Oh, and you might have a special guest. She's going to bed right now, and sometimes she does get a bit grumpy. But if you do hear a child being quite grumpy in the background, that's my little girl, Evelyn. So just apologies, everyone, just in case. So when we consider, it's good to take a step back and just think about Azure in terms of SQL Server workloads. Now, if you're using Microsoft products, typically most customers have about 40% of their VM estate, as it would traditionally be on premise, is probably a SQL Server workload. So it is a big part of everyone's day-to-day governance and running of VMs, whether it's on premise or in other clouds or even in Azure. But what can Azure do that makes things a little bit easier? Because we understand at Microsoft that sometimes we need to run our SQL Server workloads on VMs. And when we consider Azure, the fundamentals of having a good working SQL Server absolutely still apply. Exactly the same way that you would manage and build your estate on premise. You need to have a robust backup infrastructure. You need to make sure your security is properly governed. You need to be able to know and identify which servers in your estate actually have SQL Server working on them, so you can license them properly and make sure you're using the correct benefits in the right way. And all of these, when we're moving from on-premise into Azure, most of the customers that we are talking to really want to move to our PaaS-like offerings, so like Azure SQL Database and Azure SQL Managed Instance. And I help a lot of customers, as part of my day job, get from on-premise into those type of workloads. But there are times when those PaaS offerings are just not going to be available for one reason or another. It could be your application vendor doesn't support those PaaS offerings right now. It could be that you want to move out of a data center quickly, so you want to just move at scale and do that lift and shift type migration and get over into Azure really, really quickly. And Azure VMs are a really good solution for that because you can move them on scale very, very quickly. But when customers have started to build out their SQL Server platforms on Azure, especially when it comes to VMs, there's a lot of questions that start commonly being asked by customers. And this is where we at Microsoft have responded a little bit to give you some extra tools to make that a little bit easier. And the common questions we get are around, how do I find my SQL servers effectively? We can tag servers, we can put a naming convention on servers, but do I actually really know if there's a working SQL Server exe? And where is that? Is there some shadow IT going on? How do I discover SQL servers and keep on top of things being built up as my estate would grow over time? Are we being licensed correctly? How are we using our benefits like Azure, AHub, leveraging our licenses on premise and making sure we're not getting double charged for that over in Azure. We're using dev test editions of SQL Server in the right way. And this is where the slides end, happily enough. But this is where we've introduced this thing called the SQL Server IaaS Extension. If I just take, this is my view of virtual machines in my AaaS subscription, which is something that we mess around with. We all have some ability to create some VMs over in Azure to do some demos and stuff for different types of customers. And these are the ones that I've built up recently. And what is the IaaS extension? The IaaS extension actually has been around for a little while. What is it at its fundamental level? It is simply telling Azure that this VM isn't just a Windows or a Linux VM. It's a VM with SQL Server installed upon it. And once we let Azure know that is the case, there are a couple of really cool features that we can start to leverage to just, first of all, govern and manage our estate, but secondly, introduce some PaaS-like offerings onto that VM to help manage our SQL Server on a day-to-day basis a little bit more as well. Now, this view of the world, which most customers go to today, is actually a really bad way of managing your SQL Server estates. Just to give you a bit of an example, I have started building up some SQL servers. I was following my own naming convention, and then I gave contributor rights to somebody else in the organization, and they started building stuff, and they put some sort of SQL prefix on that. But do I know they haven't followed my naming convention? And now I'm suddenly unsure, actually, are these actual SQL servers? And there's nothing in this view telling me exactly, is SQL installed on there? What licenses are you using? What version is it? This just simply tells me about the VM itself, which is useful in itself, but not from when I'm managing a SQL Server estate. So what we've done with the IaaS extension is we've introduced this new view of the world called SQL Server Virtual Machines. Now, if you've been creating SQL servers from our gallery images, so you've been pulling off and creating a SQL server that we have pre-prepared, you'll probably notice something a little bit funky happening in your resource groups. You're probably noticing that you almost have like a double icon, and one of them looks like this, which is the VM. And then you have another one with a SQL icon on it, which is these lot here. But trying to group those together, we've introduced this view that brings together all of those SQL icons. And that is simply how that SQL server is being notified as Azure as a SQL server. And it has more details about the actual SQL Server operating system and the SQL Server versions that are installed on it. And if I just zoom into this a bit more, because you can get a lot more richer detail about the SQL Server. So at a glance now, I know that, first of all, everything in this view has a working SQL Server exe on it. So my kind of discovery of where SQL is installed is done. But on top of that as well, I can also start to see how I'm using benefits like Azure Hybrid Benefit or Pay As You Go. SQL Server is an expensive product, everyone. You need to be on top of your licenses and be making sure that these are being governed and deployed properly, and to make sure you're not being overpaid for your SQL servers as you land them on VMs in Azure. Next to that as well, I also get a version of the SQL Server, and if I expanded that a little bit more, the operating system with that as well. And lastly, you can see the type of edition that's been installed. And off the back of this type of information, you can start to take some sort of FinOps type exercises just to make sure that you are using these benefits in the right way. And in this example, I'm in a dev test subscription. Yeah, I've installed incorrectly, and this was a real mistake, SQL Server Enterprise Edition, which means that this is charging me an Enterprise Edition, or I'm drawing down from my Azure Hybrid Benefit in the wrong way. I should have installed this as a developer edition like the other 3 servers underneath this. And now with this IaaS extension, actually before the IaaS extension to change this was actually pretty horrible operation. You would have to back up all your databases, literally destroy the VM, delete it, and then create a new one and restore all your databases on it. But with this IaaS extension and this view of the world, you have the ability to click. I'll just click one that I've got turned on. You have this feature here that starts to be a set of features that start to be lit up as because we've registered this as a SQL server, not just as a standard VM. And the first one of those is the ability to change how Azure is billing me for the license that's installed or the license I want to use against this VM. So I can make that change quite easily and switch it from Enterprise Edition to Developer Edition, and switch it to Pay As You Go, or I could switch from we're using Pay As You Go, which is very, very costly in terms of month, but I can confirm that I've got some licenses that I want to use. And I can change that to the Enterprise Edition, click Apply, and from this hour onwards, Azure will be billing me in the right way. So a really great way of using this view and using this capability to manage not just discover, and have in front of you all of your SQL servers as they stand up in Azure, but also then how to manage your licensed estate and your benefits off the back of that as well. And in this view as well, you don't have to view, I'm logged into a tenant, and across that tenant, I have access to lots of different subscriptions, and I could select them all and have a complete view of my enterprise estate. I don't have many SQL servers, thank God, because I would be answering to my manager at the end of this month. But I have a lot of SQL. I can see my enterprise in front of me, and now I can start to use this as a tool for making sure that we're using our benefits in the right way. And the really good thing about this as well is if you're messing around with Azure, you can export this. So if you need to give this as a report to somebody who doesn't have access to the Azure portal, just click that export to CSV and you will get all of this information dropped into an Excel that you can go and share with somebody, making it very simple, especially if you're having those license conversations with your procurement team. Very easy to just click everything, select all, export, and there's your report done. And there are a lot of software on premise that will cost you a lot of money to do the same sort of thing. Now, in terms of getting your SQL servers registered, there's a couple of ways that, over time you could be building up your SQL Server estate in Azure. One of the ways is you could be pulling down some of our gallery images and building them from there, which I mentioned previously. When you do that, Azure will automatically know that this is a SQL Server being built and will do all of this registering of the SQL Server itself for you. But if you've been installing Windows and just been pulling down a Windows VM and then installing your own version of SQL Server, you drop the exes on there, drop the installs on there, and you build your own SQL servers, you bake your own, then it won't be registered with Azure as a SQL Server VM. Azure would just think of it as a standard VM, and it won't appear in this view, and you won't get all of this information and capability that starts to light up off the back of it. And we recognize that's a bit of a problem, and it's especially a problem if you've got lots and lots of SQL servers. The last thing we want to be doing is giving you RSI by turning on this feature lots and lots of times on individual VMs. So within this view, we've also added this thing called automatic SQL Server registration. And this is quite interesting because it is what this does is it enables an agent. It's set at a subscription level, and it enables an agent to go through and individually inspect every VM in your subscription, no matter whether it's SQL or not. And once it inspects that VM, it will check if there is a SQL Server installed on that VM. And if it is installed on there, it will automatically register it for you with the IaaS extension, meaning then it will appear in here and you'll be completely aware of where that SQL Server is and how you're using your benefits and your licenses off the back of that. To set this up, it's very, very simple. You simply click the automatic registration, choose your subscription that you want to do, accept the URL and click register, and it is done. It is a set once operation. And from this point, not only does it look back over what you've got in your subscription today, it runs every 24 hours. So any additional SQL servers that you build over time in these subscriptions will be recognized, identified, and cataloged into this, making sure that you're completely up to date with where your SQL servers are. So really easy feature to turn on. It doesn't cost you anything, and you get complete clarity over your SQL Server estate, something that is a lot of customers really make a lot of benefit out of. I also kind of mentioned the PaaS-like features that start to be lit up, and depending on the SQL Server version that gets identified, some of these will be lit up and some of them won't. But all of the VMs that you will install the IaaS extension with have the configure and the options to be able to set up security. So just to step through that, this gives you the ability to isolate your SQL Server or change the default port in which your SQL Server is listing on. So if you want to use non-standard ports, you can do that. You don't have to go into the VM itself. You can do it from the portal experience, which means this has got a CLI. By the way, everything in here has got a CLI counterpart to this, which means you can script all of this stuff as well. You can interface this with with a key vault. So if you've got a key vault in a subscription, you can set up the link between the SQL Server exe on the VM and the key vault simply by using the Azure portal or using the CLI that underpins this as well. We've also got an automated patching, which I would caution is just critical updates at the moment. I know this is going to be changed in the future and there'll be a lot more options available, but it will critically patch SQL and the OS as part of a routine that you set up. So it will gracefully, you set a window and it will gracefully check the latest patch updates for SQL, the SQL version that you've got, and the operating system that underpins that, and start to install those critical updates as and when they appear off the back of that. Next to that as well, we've also got an automated backup. Again, you would simply select a storage account for this SQL Server. It is SQL only backups. It doesn't do operating system backups, so it doesn't do any VM type level or file system backups. You would need to use something like Azure Backup for that type of functionality. But if all you're after is a SQL backup, then this is a good option for you. You simply select a storage account, choose a retention period, and a number of different options to configure your backups off the back of that. And those will back up that SQL Server and their native SQL Server backups, which means when you start to come to do restores, all of the history about those backups are baked into tools like SQL Server Enterprise Manager or Azure Data Studio, which means you don't have to go rummaging around which storage account these backups are. SQL will already know about them. You just right-click the database, click Restore, and it will come up with a complete backup history with the point in time that you want to pick. So really, really neat in terms of getting access to those backups nice and quickly. In terms of the other features as well, where you can enable our services, you've got some storage configuration. So if it's 2019 or above, you can add disks to this. I think I've probably covered off the main types. Yes, so a lot of features that start to introduce, it's not full PaaS, guys, but it's kind of PaaS-like, IaaS++, as I like to call it. It gives that just bit of extra functionality that Azure can offer, because now Azure is aware that SQL is installed on these VMs rather than just being marked as a standard VMs. On top of that as well, we've talked a lot about enterprise landing zones. There is a repo that I'll share as well, which means that you can set this up with management groups, and this automatic registration would pick that management group and start to enable that across those subscriptions for you on a scheduled basis. So it keeps it on top of and starts to follow that enterprise landing zone type principles. I will drop a few more links in terms of just to cover off everything I've been showing you today. But the big thing I would kind of call to action is that I would be turning this on. Like I said, it doesn't cost you anything. There's no risk to your SQL servers. Nothing's going to get changed. You can get this registered into that, get all your SQL servers discovered, and start being more aware where SQL is, and start to light up these features. If you need to use them, start to light them up and start using them off the back of that as well. And that was it, everyone. I think I'm around for the next 5-10 minutes. I've been buzzed by my wife. My tea is ready as well. So if there's any questions, obviously just drop them in the chat and I'll quickly answer those for you as well.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Mark. Spot on. I don't think we've got any questions in the chat at the minute. Nope, didn't look like it. But no, everybody wants to thank Mark. Thank you very much. That was a super session.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, Mark. Okay, and we're not going to stop there. So straight away, let's hand straight over to Clive. I can see you there eagerly waiting in the wings there, Clive. You know what I'm going to say, don't you, Clive? You're on mute. There we are.
I thought I was so prepared then as well. Right, let me just get my deck set up and move a few screens around just so I can see you all and answer any questions. Please feel free to ask any questions as we go through. Like I feel it's going to be like a great thing for me because I've got almost twice the amount of time as everyone else. So I've got more time to talk about things. So I've got more time to answer any questions. And like your intro, a really fabulous intro actually. I really like the overview there. You know, there isn't any daft questions. I've got lots of daft answers, but there's no daft questions. So please feel free to ask anything you want to know about. So let's have a quick chat. You don't really need the lowdown on me, so we'll just go into why we've got Sentinel and where we can help you with your security. We just put this out there as a you know, the problem we have to solve is global, and the signals we face in security are trillions or billions, you know, depending on what we're looking at. This is something that we process and analyze daily, so that's not a year or a month. This is per day. So we've got a vast array of signals. So we need security tools that can handle that. And that has meant you can't do it on premises anymore. It just doesn't scale to that level. So we need a cloud solution. We're dealing with volumes of information that are just huge. So we have to be able to handle that. So what is Sentinel? It's a SaaS service. So it's deployed in the cloud and in the Azure cloud. It fits in the landing zone, which we heard from Jake and also Mark. It's a SIEM and a SOAR. So we always like our acronyms, or security guys in particular like acronyms. So a SIEM is Security Information and Event Management, and a SOAR is Security Orchestration and Automated Response. So a bit of a mouthful, but basically we're going to ingest information, analyze the information, and then we can have an automated response to it. That cuts down the noise for organizations and also gives them insights. So you can see us sort of across the top. Azure Sentinel sits across a lot of our other tools, things like M365 Defender and all that products there. It sits across Azure Security Center, and probably done a disservice here to the third-party data sources. I've shown a few, but there are literally hundreds or thousands or even tens of thousands of tools out there we can get information from. And it's really up to you to decide, you know, how much information do I want to bring in. And by the way, we will talk about costs a little bit, and we charge per gig. Okay, so you know, the more information you send, the more we charge. If you stop sending it, we stop charging it. So it's really it is really quite flexible in that regard. But there might be lots of third-party information you wish to bring into your solution if you need to. So I'm probably going to stop on slides there. If anyone wants the slides after the call, really happy to share them. There's lots of other information on there. There's lots of other sort of like tons of links which you're not going to be able to read, and lots of advice around training as well, because that's one of the other sort of key parts. You know, you need to understand. I'm going to give you a quick demo, but you need to understand the, you know, how it really plugs together, how you architect it, how you can get certified, etc. All that good stuff. Let me just do all that and go to the portal. All aware of the Azure portal, you set your landing zones up and everything like that, all that's good. So we want to use Sentinel, and it's a SaaS service globally, so I can type in Sentinel and there it is. So I didn't have to deploy Sentinel. What I do have to do is have a log analytics workspace to store my logs and information in. So I've already got some created, but if I wanted to create a new one, you've got to answer a couple of sort of key questions. So let's create a new workspace. The key questions are, which subscription do you want to put it in? So hopefully you've done that part of your landing zone. Which resource group do you want to put it in? So I'm just going to select the one at the top of the list. And what name? Fred. That won't probably pass checks, okay. But more importantly, what region in Azure do you want to put it in? You generally put it in the same region in Azure where your data resides. You can have multiple workspaces across the globe. You typically only do that if you've got data in those countries and perhaps restrictions. So like the sort of case in point in Germany, Eastern Australia, where the information can't leave those countries. So you might create multiple workspaces there, or if you've got resources in those places. Other thing to note, you know, calling something Fred's not a good idea, or POC. If you name it, you can't rename it. Okay, so you can't edit that name. So if you call it POC, and then you aren't planning to remove it before you go into production, it's always going to be called Fred POC, which is probably not best practice. And you've heard that from the other guys as we've been going through. So let's just jump back quickly. There we go. So I'm able at the beginning to select my workspace. So you can see here, I've got a couple of things here. Most of these are my ones in Microsoft. You can connect to third-party ones. That is an option. So this is what our security partners do. You know, I might be Clive at a security partner, and I've got 10 different customers, all with their own Active Directories and their own security data. So I can have visibility across those if I need to, or I can have visibility across my workspaces and all my regions as well. And they work in exactly the same way. Well, whether they're my Active Directory or someone else's, you know, if you've been granted the rights, you can get to them. You could also tick multiples to see a consolidated view. So I'm doing that third party, that Fabricam one, and let's take my IoT demo one. And I can see an incidence view across all of those. So that's really important for, you know, our security partners. There's also, you know, you might be working for a large organization that has offices around the world or services around the world. So you want to see the data, and you see your alert queue in all these different workspaces all around the globe. But for the interest of most of this demo, I'm going to sort of concentrate on just 1 or 2 workspaces just to keep it simple. So don't really need to untick them, but I'm just going to jump into this particular one in the US. Because we are global, you can use them anywhere. So the first bit of Azure Sentinel really shows you the called the overview page. So it's the overview. Most people don't spend a lot of time here. It's just giving you a few stats about what's going on. You know, are my number of events increasing on a daily basis, or it's key to 24 hours. We keep the data for free for up to 3 months in here, so you can search back over that data. I've got quite a big alert and incident queue. So, you know, as a SOC manager, if I was a security operations person, I'd probably be questioning why I've got so many active alerts. And I've got some highlights about, you know, where some of my data, my bad data might be coming in around the globe, and I can move around the map, and I can then zoom into those particular areas if I don't understand it. But how do we get to this bit? Very simply, you need to follow a 3-step process, and we even highlight it on the get started, which I've always thought should be on the left-hand side. But, you know, collect some data, create some security alerts. Actually, I should use my clicker. Create some security alerts and automate. You do find is some people automate, some people don't. You know, an automation could be as simple as sending an email, or it could be as complex as doing 50 things at once. It's really up to you about how you do that, and we've got lots of examples. But pretty much everyone will collect data, and then everyone should be creating a security alert. I say this should be because I've had a few, you know, interesting customer conversations where they've collected the data and said we've got no value out of Sentinel, and then you realise they haven't created any alerts, so it couldn't find anything. There, that one. You can hit the buttons here to launch it, or these actually map to these particular buttons there and there. We go into data connectors. There's a list of 116. We should be up to about 130 by the end of this month. We've almost added 100 of these in since January. So lots of work on connectors. This is not a full list of connectors because a lot of them, like syslog, for instance, you know, could be used for 30, 40, 50, 100 different tools out there. So we don't have a bespoke connector for every scenario. We do publish, and it'll be in the blog. We do publish a blog about all the, which is called the Grand List for Sentinel. So we do publish this list that you can read down. So if you come across the connector you need, but it's not in the portal, you can read down here and think, well, actually, I didn't see one for beyond security, and you know, here's some instructions about how to get that data source. It's probably an API, it's probably syslog or Ceph, you know, one of those standard connectors that we can reuse, or there's another way of doing it, or if it's a SaaS service, we can export the information that way. Or we can use third-party agents. We've got Stash, we've got NXLog, and a number of others also that you can use. If you're already using those tools, you can just send that information onto the workspace. Let's quickly go back there. When you need to connect something, let's get rid of syslog. Some connectors are really easy. So if we take, let's take Azure Activity, tells me I'm already connected. So I've got these green bars, so I know they're connected already. But if I open the connector page, it's no surprise that I've got data flowing in because I'm connected. But you just literally simply click one button and you'll be connected up. If you, I no longer, for day-to-day users, have write access to here. So I couldn't click the button to go and sort of onboard that. I would have to, I'd have to get an account that could, or go through PIM to elevate myself to be able to go and do that. When you set the connector up, you need those rights. After it's set up, you no longer need those rights. So you could be an analyst with read-only access, but still get to see it. The other important thing with connectors is we have workbooks which visualize the data. So there's some example workbooks there, and we'll come to those later. So example, very simple queries. They're not ones you'll use in a security context, but it gives you some samples. But you do have this list of security rules you can apply to that data connect you've just onboarded. So these all apply to the Azure Activity Data Connector. Some of them are unique to that connector. So you can see these few here are unique to Azure Activity. Some rules work across different sets of data. So this one works across a number of one, including Azure Activity. So you've got Azure Activity plus one other, and it's going to highlight something between the two sets of data. You don't have to go and manually sort of cross-reference all that. You can just fire that rule off. If it sees the data connector there, happy days, it's great, and it will start analyzing it for you. So I can create rules from here, or I can go back to the main page of Sentinel, to the next blade down, the in there, and I can see my active rules. So I've got a sum total of 255, which is probably a bit excessive, but it's a demo environment. And then I can see my rule templates. We're adding to these all the time, so this grows, every week, every month, including ones from our own SOC, our own analysts who are out with customers, fixing things, and also the community as well. Whether that's customers or partners can also contribute to these. But I can sort and filter these, decide which templates I want to deploy. But I'll just call your attention to the Fusion rule. It's recently updated, actually, so I don't know if you can see that. Let's zoom in a bit. This alone, this one rule, takes in 122 other rules, essentially, to analyze the data. So if you've got any of these sources of data, plus others, so it's not an extensive list. Okay, so other firewall vendors are included, for instance. It's looking for 122 different scenarios. Now, I'm just going to jump back to a couple of slides, probably just to explain that in a bit more detail. So this is a really key rule for us. And it really just, actually, rather than presenting it, I'm just going to drag the slide deck over. I think you can see that all right. Remember I talked about earlier, we've got all these signals, the billions and a day. So just looking at Active Directory, Office 365 and Azure, and obviously we'd add in LinkedIn, Xbox, Bing, and a vast array of other services. So this number will be a lot bigger. With the Fusion rule, applying ML and AI to it, we're analysing that information and getting down to a few very high incidents. You've got other ways of getting the lows and mediums, but this is really focusing on the highs, but getting out of the noise. So it's slightly easier to see on this table, I think. Well, hopefully it is. You put a question in the chat if you don't agree. But if we didn't process all this data down with AI and machine learning, you could be looking at an analyst having to look through 5,000 plus alerts just for that one rule, that one use case on a daily basis. If you go up to that one, 37,000 rules, that's beyond a human. Unless you're really fast at reading, you just literally wouldn't get down the list today. So we have to reduce that noise. So if you see one of these Fusion rules, if you do deploy Sentinel, when you turn it on, you get some data collected, and you see a Fusion one, you really want to have a look, because they're normally really targeted. So it's a really good thing to concentrate on. It's up until recently, it was the only rule we had on by default. So there's hardly any impact to the SOC because it's only a single rule, but it really comes back with some really good, interesting stuff. Other rules are there for you to create. So if I want to create a rule, I can choose one from the templates and hit create rule, and I can pretty much walk through a next process to go and deploy those. You could always see the query, so you can the query language we use. You can always see those. I chose a really complicated one. They're not all as complicated as this, But it does mean if you know your KQL query language, you can go and edit them. And if you've been using it in Azure Resource Graph or in Defender or Security Center or Log Analytics, you might have some skills in it already, which would be fantastic. You can reuse it. But there are lots of options just in the user interface where you can go and tweak things about, you know, how far back it looks in time, how often it runs, thresholds, etc. How you want to enable the rules. This is a really neat option for, I want to aggregate my rules that are my alerts that fire into a single incident. So rather than having lots of different incidents in on a big long list, if I get up to 150 alerts, I just add those to the same incident, providing the entities don't change. So just a quick one with that one. If I set this up, this would apply. So if Clive does something 150 times, I would raise one incident, but my counter for alerts would increase because the account name hasn't changed. But if I was to move to another IP address, you know, like another host, then I would get a new incident because Clive is the same, but the host or IP address has changed. So you get to see that. And the other bit is automated response. This is where we launch the playbooks. So as I said before, these could be a simple task like there's probably a send email one. Yeah, so very much send an email. That's the one task. It will take all the alert data when it fires. It knows about that data in the queue, and it pushes that out to whatever named email you've put in that playbook. And I'll perhaps show you the playbook in a little while. You can find or get data. You can, you know, open a ticket in a reporting, you know, in an ITSM tool. You could, you know, talk to another one as well if you want to do that. There's a whole raft of options you can do to automate things. We also have another cool automation feature as well, which I'll actually do a slightly different way. So you'd basically set up your playbooks to respond in the way that makes sense to you, and then you'd go and create those rules. Very quickly though, there is another type of rule, which is the Microsoft Incident Rules. If you've got the connectors to our standards like cloud services, like Azure Defender, Azure Security Center, or MPAS or Defender for Endpoint, you can click one of these and this will just bring in all the rules from that data source. So you don't have to go and say, the Defender sends me 99 rules, I need to name them all. We just bring in one and that's pretty much it. You have some filtering available to you as well. And again, automated response. So we've got the data in, we've created some rules, hopefully. You've got some data sources that are chargeable and some that are free. So we normally say to you, start with the free ones. You know, that makes sense. We do list them out. Again, there's quite a nice document about cost and billing. And there's a list of all the connectors and whether they're free or paid for. So typically things like alerts tend to be free, but if you want the raw data, you know, that's a chargeable event. So you can see a lot more information than that on the doc site. When you've got the data in, you know, you may not get an incident for a while, but you know, from my environment, I've got lots of incidents. So I've got 108 new ones today, and 2 of those are active. So I can see them in my alert queue, and then I can start, you know, do I want to investigate this? So if I click on one, I get some more information. I can take ownership, I can change status, all that good stuff. I can scroll down and see if there's any tags against it. No, there's not, but I can add a tag or just write some data against it if I need to. But I might want to zoom in slightly just to see a bit more screen estate. So let's just zoom into the full page. This gives me that same blade, but now on the left. I've also got a timeline view. This was only a single alert, so obviously it's only one entry. Actually, maybe let's just go back and find one that's got multiples. Let's take this one. Full details. So now I've got 12 alerts in my timeline, so I've got more information. I can drill into the fine details if I want to. If I really want to, I can get into the actual raw data. So I can see the rows of data in the Log Analytics workspace. So I can get down and see the precise data. Now I've only got one entry come back there, so I could even go and change the queries, see all the ones that match. And maybe, you know, I've got no experience in the query language, so I can do a couple of things here just really quickly. I can swap to a filter view where we show some of the data. So maybe I only want to show malicious credential theft, impossible travel, pass the ticket, with alert severity of high. If I hit apply and run, it builds the queries for me on the fly. So I've only had to do a point and click. I can also add some filtering. So maybe I want this malicious credential theft, but where is incident? So I exclude the false. So only where incident equals true. And again, that's put the syntax in for me. So it just gives me a bit of a heads up. And there may be nothing. So, okay, there are. So those should all be, oops, where? Oh, it's not empty. Sorry, I was doing the wrong thing. That's not quite the command I meant, but you know, you do get the idea. So let's go back to my incident blade. The other thing you may do from here is create a team. This is a teams channel. I was thinking of better words for that. But you can create a team. Maybe I want to work with other people on this. So I want to invite other team members into this incident, and it builds a channel in Teams with the title. You can put description in, and I could just invite myself, but you could have a group in Teams, maybe your tier 1 analyst, tier 2, tier 3, that type of thing. Or based on the alert type, if it's from a certain product, so maybe it's an alert from Defender. So you might have a group of people who specialize in Defender, so you can invite those people. Ultimately, if you so if I was to create that, it will appear in my Teams list, and I can get access to OneNote and SharePoint and files. If I was to close this event, that would save that Teams channel for me as well, so I'll archive it out, so I can always refer back to it if I need to. The other really nice thing is that automation rule I promised. When I click on and create an automation rule from within an alert, it pre-fills some of the data. So it's told me what my alert name is. It's looking at that specific alert, but it's pulled out the IP address that was involved. So I don't have to go and drill into that data. It's already parsed that for me. I could go and add another IP address if I want to put another range in or something like that. I can tweak it. I can add additional filtering. So maybe I want that alert with that IP address, but only when the severity equals high and medium. You know, so I can do some filtering there, and I can add additional conditions in there. If we poll to see which one are the options, so you can always just point and click on these. They're pretty straightforward. Then you have an option to do actions. So it pre-filled a change status. It's going to close this out for me. No, it's probably not what I want. Maybe I want to make this active. Maybe I want to make it active and tag it. Demo. So I can put a tag in there, and maybe I want this only to run until tomorrow at 8 PM. So that this rule will last for a small amount of time. That's really useful when you're testing out rules. Maybe you're creating a rule and you don't want it to. The action may be to only assign it to yourself while you're doing the testing, and then other people don't see it. One of the most powerful actions, though, is called in the playbooks. And again, it will enumerate through and list all the playbooks that are available. And in this particular version, I've only got a few, but they're not particularly brilliant ones. Let's choose one at random. Where that comes in really useful is maybe I decide, I've got an emergency situation and I need some more automation against all my rules. You might remember I had over 200. So if I needed to apply them without having to go to every individual one, I can select all. And now I really didn't want to do that, actually, did I? So I didn't want to hit save, but I'll go and unpick that in a second. But you can create some interesting rules there. They're all stored in the automations rules piece. And what did I call it? That one, wasn't it? That one. Let's go into that. And I need to disable it. 5 demos, brilliant. Don't tell anybody. So we've got some rules set up. We've ingested data. You might want to add rules and solutions en masse. So we've actually got this nice feature now is solutions from third parties who can publish their offerings in the marketplace. So if you wanted to deploy, I don't know, Qualys, you can click on that and it will give you a full package of the workbooks, analytics rules, the connectors, if they've got them. So, depends on the particular solution. It might have more options that it can deploy, and you just hit create and answer the questions. You can do that as well. You might also want to visualize the information you've got in the alert. So let's just go back to one of these threat intelligent ones. I can wait for that to finish validating. I can investigate this graphically. So you might have seen this in demonstrations before. I can move this graph landscape around. We're making some changes to this to make it so you can pin it in place so it doesn't disappear off the screen. But it's really good to see a timeline view of what's going on in this particular incident. You can hover over an item, we'll poll to see if there's any data. So you saw that it's checked. There's no data in any of these records, but there are some related alerts. And it will try and draw them out for me, and I can move them around and zoom in, zoom out. I click on them. I can also get entity behavior insights from them if they exist. So I click on insights, and we'll use our entity behavior tool, which is built in, which isn't the case in some other SIEM platforms, to analyze them if there are any insights for that. And I can see info about it. So lots of good, rich intelligence there. This really helps the analyst to drill through the attack, maybe across one product or multiple products. You might have multiple alerts in there, or lots of different information. You can visualize that really, really quickly. And probably more importantly, you will always have the option to run a playbook. So maybe when you've done your analysis, you think, right, I need to automate something now, and I want to send an email, whatever that is, send email. And I click that and hit run, and off that will go and run that playbook for me. So investigation is really important. To go back one, you can also see some more insight when you're in here as well if you click a workbook. So I remember workbooks are visualizations. They're going to run the KQL queries, but they visualize it in a way we've already predefined for you. So if I click on the incident overview workbook, that will give me a bit more insight into that particular incident number. But I said we've created these for you. You can edit and alter everything in here. So if you don't like the color, you don't like the type of filters, you don't like the graphs, you don't like the information, you can, what have I done there? Subscription, which one am I in? Go and change some things. So, if I don't like that massive great pie chart, I can go and alter it. Obviously, if you alter it and we make some updates, they won't be reflected. But, it does mean you can tweak it. It also means sometimes you might want to find something that's really useful to you. So maybe let's take actually slightly different environment. I'm going to use this one here. If I've want to investigate that incident, takes a few seconds to load. One of the reasons for choosing this particular incident, we've also got remediations we just added literally last night. If there's any, sorry, it's too quick. Got rid of that one, didn't I? Yeah, bad demo. But it would bring up any remediation actions contained in the actual alert itself, or in a watch list, a file. So you can have extra information in there if you need to. There is also a really lovely workbook for the SOC manager. So most of the stuff I've done so far has been setting up the connectivity, writing the rules, but you also want to see how efficient you are. And that's normally a task for the manager. This is sort of something you might have on that bridge room screen, and you can even set an auto refresh on any of these workbooks to poll. But this is just telling me in my particular workspace over the last 30 days, here's my sort of incident queue. So you can see there's a bit of a trend here. It's going up a little bit, and you can even do what we call a time brush and zoom in onto that. So perhaps see what type of alerts are being closed. What's really nice, and this is people in the security community feedback on all sorts of SLAs. At Microsoft, in our own SOC, these are the only two we really use: the mean time to triage and the mean time to closure. So how fast does someone start triaging, and when does it close? There's more details on it as well, so there's more of a breakdown, so you even get to see individual people. When actually, if I did it, I won't move around, but if I did it in my other one, you'd see me, and I'm pretty poor at actually doing closes. Other people are faster. you generally see, hopefully, you'd see a much faster time than that if you're applying lots of automations. Most people would automate the first bit of the triage process, so it happens within seconds, which is really good. Again, you can edit these and have a look through them, or sort of change them. There are lots of other workbooks and lots of other reports available to you. Lots of templates in there. So you can have a look through these. There's hundreds now. So both from ourselves and from partners. There's also a lot from the community. They're even marked as community offerings. This one was actually the community liked these two workbooks and that one. They said, wouldn't it be good if we can combine those together into a single workbook? So they took the best of those three, and merged them together. About the community side, we have a community blade, like you might have seen it in Azure Security Center as well. But we have a repository on GitHub, which you can jump to. And things like workbooks are out there, and parsers and playbooks we talked about earlier. So you can see, when they've been updated. So which ones have been changing more recently, perhaps which ones. We often put things into the GitHub a few days, weeks, months before we release it into the portal. So again, it's worth having a look here. You can always star these and get or watch these to see if there's updates. The same for the detections, the rules. There's lots of detections. They're all done by the vendor or product. So AWS ones, there's some ones in there, and they've all been updated in the last month. So you can see there's been some changes there. And if you want to drill into and see the metadata, the info about it, about how you might configure this. So we're recommending this is how you configure it at the frequency and thresholds. It maps back to the MITRE attack framework. So we've got the reference number there and the query itself. So there's lots of good data in there. Really useful for searching as well. So those security people know if you sign on, you get an event ID 4624, 4625s. If I want to find out where they appear in any of the types of technology, I can go and do a search. You can see examples. It's a really good way of finding, has someone else done the thing I'm thinking of? So you can search through the GitHub for that. Other things of note, briefly touch on watch lists. These are include and exclude lists. So you might have a watch list of your key IP addresses, or IP addresses by subnet, or your preferred users, or your users you're suspicious about. That's loading incredibly slow, so I'll probably skip to always have a couple of demo tenants open and see if that one's going a bit quicker. Is it not my lucky day? I see someone in the chat saying the quality wasn't good, but oh yeah, I've got one here. So this is actually my recommended actions watch list. So it's every alert that fires. If I want a new set of actions that the analyst can see, so step one of what they need to do is validate and scope the alert. And so it's just filtered in a slightly different way. Let's do it that way. Step two is do that. I can use this to provide richness to the analysts so they know what they need to do to actually work through these steps. We've got more functions for the analysts in notebooks. Out of time really, so I won't really go into that, but that's really the depth machine learning. If you're really going to get machine learning, you can do that. There's also the hunting blade, which is really powerful. Quite a lot of people start here because you can literally run all queries. So this is going to take nearly sort of 247 queries, run them against my data set. So as you start adding data connectors, you can run against it and see which ones you get results. So this one's come back with a result, and very much like I did before, I can view the results. I can understand what type of data it's come back with, and maybe alter or tweak the query, but I can then promote it to be a proper alert if I need to. So I can take it from a hunting query that's just going to run ad hoc, but I can then make it a query that's going to run on schedule. The other thing I can do in hunting is I can do live streaming, which is like, maybe I'm thinking, when does John sign on next? So I write a query that looks at the Azure AED logs, the sign in, and I look for event ID 4624 where username equals John. And if I hit play on that type of query, it's just going to run in the background. It's going to, like me sitting as an analyst, keep pressing the return button. But rather than me having to do that and wasting all my time, I can let the tool do that for me. If I get a positive hit, the counter will go up. But more importantly, the notification area of the Azure portal will go up. So if I've gone to lunch, and John doesn't actually sign on for another sort of like 16 hours, I don't have to sit there keeping an eye on this particular blade. I can just get. So we've gone through most of the key areas. One of the other ones, just briefly touch on, is entity behavior. This is a really critical one for us. User entity behavior is what most people refer to, but we call it just entity behavior. The reason we're doing more than just users. So I'm doing accounts, I'm doing hosts, and we're doing IP addresses, and we're going to add other entities that you're going to search through. But it's a really good way of, so rather than doing user entity behavior, I'm going to do a host entity, and I'll pick on the admin PC. I can see how it's connected. The heartbeat tells me it's on an agent. It's in Azure. Have we got an IP address yet? We'll have to pull that out. It's running Defender and Defender for Endpoint, so it's got a couple. It's configured for a couple of tools, and we're just polling to see if we got any machine learning or any insights against that that data. Now this demo environment's running slowly, so this might be a short demo. Let's actually probably try 7 days worth of data to see if we can just kick it into touch. In the interest of time, I'm going to ignore that. Here you go. So it's just giving me some entity insights. So I was looking at this earlier. I might not have gone back full enough in time, but yeah, so little things like this. It's looking for, is this normal? This particular event ID. Generally, over that time range, we would expect you to get about 53 of those. You've got 60, so it is a variant. If you suddenly saw 6,000, you might be more interested. So you've got some really good insights on your information there. Other thing to sort of cover off here. No, there's a few things I've missed, but I've covered the basics. The other thing is to understand is your costs. The one number you're really interested in is how much data you ingest on a daily basis, the per gig number. So you can see here I get a summary. So my peak was about 60 gig, but probably average is about 35-ish gig, something like that, if you have a look at that. There are some reports and a couple of workbooks in here where you can go in and get the exact number if you need it. You then take that number into the pricing calculator, you type in Sentinel, you choose your region. You can, well, actually, rather than per gig, if you know your EPS number, so if you've come from perhaps a different SIM tool that works in events per second, you might have, 5,000 events per second. You can use that if you want to. But if you know your logs ingested, let's put that in at 50 gig a day. It gives you your price for the log analytics workspace to ingest the data, Sentinel to analyze the data, and any retention costs. So you then get your price per month. If there's any what we call capacity reservation tiers, so if you go to 51, for instance, you get a discount on the Sentinel price. So 51 gig, your price halves for the Sentinel piece. And I think from memory for log analytics, it's got a 15% discount. So it's 88 to it. So I now get a 15% off my log analytics price and a 50% off that. If you start getting into the 1 terabyte range or 2 terabyte ranges, there's even more discounts there as well. So the pricing generally is pretty easy to work out when you've got the data in there. If you need any help to estimate the data, if you don't have it in there, we do have some examples from the customer base, but you can see your discounts very clearly. And when you hit these tiers, you do have to apply these, into your own workspace. We can't, as Microsoft can't reach in and do these, so you need to look at your graph and hit apply. If anyone's interested in the slides, I've got a couple of examples in there. There's a nice playbook actually to report on your costs per day, so you could set a value you're happy with. So if you suddenly get a spike on a particular day, you'll get an alert, perhaps send an email or an ITSM ticket, so you can understand that if you need to. And I think that's me done for tonight. So got a little bit of time back. And don't want to keep everyone too late. I know you've got the quiz to do now. So thanks for your time. Any questions before or afterwards, please let me know. But I'll hand back to John and Dean, I think.
That's lovely. Thanks a lot, Clive. fantastic. Every time I see Sentinel, I just get more mind blown. It's a fantastic product. So yeah, thanks for that overview. Really appreciate it. So yeah, if everybody wants to give Clive some appreciation, it's great, isn't it, when you see the little virtual hands clap now instead of the noise. Cool. Right, it's quiz time then, everybody. So I'm going to hand over to Matt now, but if everybody's ready, we'll jump straight on in. Get your Kahoot apps at the ready. I think there's still a good few of us in the chat there, so let's get everybody in. In fact, I'm going to join this one because I haven't seen the questions this month.
No, I've kept them from you this month. There we go. Everyone should be able to see that one now as it appears.
Yeah, got you.
So you all know the drill by now. Kahoot.it or on the Kahoot app. Enter the pin, enter a nickname, get ready to start.
Are we going for first and second place prizes, £25 vouchers, Matt?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Good odds tonight. There's not many everyone tonight.
Dean's laughing already for some reason.
Just Simon's name.
Don't father. It has to be Simon, doesn't it? Yeah.
Nice.
Who else?
So it's collect the questions tonight from the recent build conference, from a little bit about Xbox stuff because it was E3 this week.
Give me like 5 minutes. Just like with the webinar's almost finished. I just need to ask a couple of questions and then I'm done.
What was that?
I think that was Simon telling someone else that he's got 5 minutes on this webinar and then he's done.
He doesn't know how many questions there are.
It's true.
Got 9 people in. There's 15 people now on the call. So give it another minute or so, and then we'll kick off. There we go. That's good. Can we get a couple more, maybe? Very good odds tonight.
Can you refresh? Is there a problem on the screen? Is there name whose name is not displaying? Oh,
I can see that name.
Oh yeah, it's you might. Yeah, there we go. Oh yeah, it is there. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone still struggling? Last opportunity. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's rock. So time is a factor of theirs. We've not done this before. Fastest finger first. Question 1. Which of the following will not run on AKS with Azure Arc? Is it functions? Is it logic apps? Is it API management? Or is it service bus? That's a fantastic new feature to allow you to run Azure PaaS services in any Kubernetes cluster, pretty much. And oh, got split. It's service bus. No, API management is one of those services that will run. 4 of you this time. Good split. Dean with the fast fingers. Question 2. How much faster is Entity Framework Core on .NET 6 compared with 5 in requests per second? This is a mind-blowing number, this one is. The amount of performance tuning they're doing at .NET 6 is incredible. If you're a fan of that tech, 70% faster, which either means the old version was terrible or they've done a lot of work. What have we got? Elon Musk. Nice to have you on board, Elon. Question 3. Microsoft is working with the Met Office to build us a supercomputer. What will the storage capacity be? 256 gig, 1.5 meg, 4 million terabytes, or 1.6 millivanillion terabytes? Yeah, easy one. I admire your optimism, the two people that voted for the millivanillion. Oh, it's a fight at the top. Which of the following game franchises is not owned by Microsoft? Doom, Halo, Uncharted, or Fallout? No, Doom's now an owned property, part of the Bethesda deal. Uncharted is the right answer there, which is a Sony studio game. And that's changed at the top. Oof. Aidan and Sam. Question 5. How many games are currently available on Game Pass on console? Now, bear in mind, I actually set this question before E3 when I think there was another 15 or 20 added. It's 364 apparently, which makes it incredibly good value. Aiden's still surging at the top. On fire. Question 6. What's the minimum Azure Sentinel RBAC role that allows you to view and manage incidents? Sentinel Responder, Sentinel Reader, Sentinel Contributor, or Sentinel Guardian? Sentinel Responder. Most of you got that one. Well done. Tough one tonight. Got you some shake-up at the top. Aidan still pulling ahead. Question 7. In 2021, the SolarWinds CEO blamed their hack on an intern using a bad password. What was the password that they were using? You're right. It was SolarWinds 123, which is amazing. More amazing the fact that he blamed the intern, which was just terrible. What significant change has been made to Visual Studio 2022? It'll require a 3080 Ti graphics card. It's a 64-bit application. It'll only support VB6, or it's Linux and Mac OS only. It's a 64-bit application for the first time. Well done, the 5 of you that got that one right. Aidan looks like it's going to be on with this one. How many devices is Windows 10 on as of April 2021 monthly active devices? Is it 1 billion? Is it 700 million? Is it 1.3 billion or 230 million? It's 1.3 billion. Well done to the 5 of you that got that one right. That's a staggering number. And it's not a lot of change at the top. Question 10. What's the name for the distributed ledger service that Microsoft announced at Build 2021? Is it Azure Quorum, Azure Blockchain Service, Azure Confidential Ledger, or the Azure Buzzword Repository? It was the Azure Confidential Ledger. Blockchain Service is the current one that is now being replaced. Again, it's tight at the top. Question 11. What does SIEM stand for? Security Information and Event Management, Security Ingestion and Extract Metrics, Search, Invoke, Extend, Manage, Sausages include every meat. Yes, I'm glad you were all paying attention on that one. Although I'm pretty sure it's true about sausages. How many downloads were there of .NET 5 in the first 6 months? Breaking the record of .NET 3. 3.6 million was the right answer. Oh, Dean's been knocked off the top spot. Or one of the top spots is going to be really close in that fight at the end. Which of the following is not supported by .NET Multi-Platform UI? That's MAUI, as it's known. Mac Catalyst, iOS, Android, or Windows Phone? It's absolutely Windows Phone. I'm slightly ashamed that the three of you thought it wasn't. I mourn Windows Phone. Oh, Dean, did you not get that one right? Ah, dearie me. What's the official name for Logic Apps V2, the one that runs on the functions runtime? Is it Logic Apps Premium, Logic Apps Standard, Logic Apps for Enterprise Pro Edition 2000, or Logic Apps Series X? It's Logic Apps Standard. We're building up to a Logic Apps Premium, I'm sure. Oh, dearie me. Dean's going further and further down that chart. Last question, my favourite one of the night. According to the Welsh Azure Twitter feed from June 4th, what is the number? And that was the tweet we sent out.
I just retweeted it as well.
Yeah. Oh, well, now that's spoiled.
Oh my God.
5276. Well done. So it's a hint to pay more attention to our Twitter feed from now on, because I'm going to be using it a little bit, I think. So let's see where everyone stands. In third place, we have Sam. Well done, Sam. In the prizes now, Sebastian Steph. And number one, Aidan. Well done, everyone. Round of applause for everyone.
Yeah, well done.
If we don't already have them, then drop your details in the chat and we'll get your prizes out to you.
Yeah, Sebastian, Aidan, if you want to just drop your emails in the chat there, or private message me or Matt or somebody, or the Welsh Azure Twitter feed, we'll get the prizes sorted. Well done, everyone. Right, okay, let's wrap this up then. So let me just quickly share my screen. Okay, so yeah, thanks everybody for joining us this month. Hope you enjoyed it. Huge thanks to obviously all our speakers tonight, for Baz, for Jake, for Mark, and for Clive. Have been fantastic sessions. I hope you'll all agree. RSVP, if you can, jump onto the Twitter handle, search for the meetup link, and join us next month on the 15th of July. That would be great. And finally, if you can leave us some feedback, if I can get my mouse to work, that would be most appreciated. Scan the QR code or browse that URL. Feedback is always welcome, of course. So yeah, anything you can do on that is fantastic. But for now, this has been the Welsh Azure User Group session for June, and we'll see you all next month. Thanks for joining, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you very much. Cheers. Thank you.
Cheers, thanks.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.